Have you ever seen a moment so cruel it steals the air from the room? A rich man in a tuxedo slapping his pregnant wife in front of hundreds of people, and worse, doing it while holding hands with his mistress. I know it sounds like a nightmare, but it's real. And what came next? Nobody, not even him, could have predicted. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about power, art, and the rise of a woman they tried to erase. Trust me, stay until the end. Now, let's begin. The chandelier above shimmered like 1,000 stars, casting a golden glow across the grand ballroom. It was the annual Infinite Future Gala, hosted at the Montclair Hotel, a place where only the most powerful were invited. Waiters weaved through the crowd with trays of oysters and champagne, while a quartet played soft jazz in the background. Everything gleamed. Everything was perfect, until it wasn't. The room had just gone silent. Then it happened. Smack! A sharp, sickening slap cracked through the air like lightning splitting the sky. The music stopped, conversations froze, and every head turned. Standing near the stage, in front of the charity auction podium, was Nicholas Kane, one of the richest tech moguls in America. His hands still suspended midair, his face twisted in rage. Beside him, his young mistress Kira Sloan looked smug, lips curled into a cruel smirk, and in front of him was her, Sophia Kane, 8 months pregnant. Wearing a pale blue gown that gently hugged her swollen belly, a custom piece from a forgotten designer. She didn't wear sequins or diamonds that night, just a simple silver chain and the weight of everything she had endured. Sophia staggered slightly from the force of the slap. Her hand instinctively went to her face and then down to cradle her belly. Her eyes widened, not just from the pain, but from the betrayal. The room erupted. Did he just slap her? Whispered one woman, gasping. She's pregnant, cried another, clutching her pearls. Phones were already raised, recording, capturing every second. But Nicholas, in his rage, didn't seem to care. You just had to show up, didn't you? He hissed. You had to ruin my night? Sophia blinked slowly. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. Not yet. Kira's laughter broke the silence like a blade. She really thought he wanted her here, she scoffed loudly, glancing around at the frozen crowd as if inviting their agreement. Sophia slowly turned her head toward Kira. No anger, no screaming, just a deep, heartbreaking sadness. She had come here for one reason, to support her husband, the man she had stood beside through years of silence, secrets, and sacrifice. And he had just humiliated her, publicly, violently. Security hovered near the edges of the chaos, unsure whether to intervene. Sophia's sister, Eliza, pushed her way through the crowd but stopped short, tears welling in her eyes. Sophia, she called softly, but Sophia didn't move. Nicholas turned back toward the silent crowd, throwing up his hands like he was the victim. What? You don't know the full story. She's crazy. She's been stalking me. That's when Sophia finally spoke. Her voice was low but powerful, and it sliced through the ballroom like ice. I'm your wife, she said, her eyes locked on him. And I'm carrying your child. Nicholas rolled his eyes. Yeah, well, not for much longer. The gasp that followed that sentence wasn't just from the cruelty of it. It was the cold, detached way he said it. Like she was disposable. Like the baby didn't matter. Like the last 10 years had been nothing. Sophia took a breath, her spine straightening. For a moment, she looked like she might collapse. But instead, something shifted. And then she smiled. Not the smile of a woman in denial, but the kind of smile that comes right before the storm. I hope the cameras are rolling, she said softly, because that will make the contest submission even more powerful. Nicholas's brow furrowed. What the hell are you talking about? But Sophia just turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble, each step steadier than the last. No tears. No screams. Just silent resolve. Later that night, the video would go viral. #Slapgate would trend for 72 hours straight. Feminist groups, celebrities, politicians, all would weigh in. But what no one knew at that moment was that Sophia's unborn child, still months from birth, would eventually recreate that exact scene with a single painting. A painting that would sweep through the global art world, capturing not just the pain, but the power of that moment. The raw truth of what it meant to be betrayed, humiliated, and still rise. But before the world saw the art, before Sophia reclaimed her name, before Nicholas Kane's empire crumbled, there was this night. A moment of unbearable pain. The kind of pain that changes a person forever. And it started, as many tragedies do, with a man who thought money gave him the right to crush the woman who built his world. But what Nicholas forgot, what Kira laughed off, what everyone in that ballroom misjudged, was that Sophia Kane wasn't just a woman scorned. She was a mother in the making. And nothing is stronger than a woman protecting her child. Sophia Grace Kane wasn't always the woman people whispered about at fundraisers and luxury galas. Long before her name was trended, twisted, and tossed around in scandal, she was just a quiet girl from Aurora, Illinois. A girl who never wanted the spotlight, who grew up in a two-bedroom home with creaky floors and mismatched plates, where love was shown through warm meals and handmade birthday cards. She was 32, a trained art therapist. A woman who spent most of her adult life helping children process trauma through color, shape, and silence. Ironically, it was through her own trauma that she would one day change the world without meaning to. Her mother, Patricia, had been a kindergarten teacher, warm and wildly creative, always humming 80s ballads while making oatmeal. Her father, Joel, passed away when Sophia was just 9, taken by a heart attack one winter morning while shoveling snow. That day became a frozen scar in her memory. After that, it was just her and her mother. Best friends, soulmates. Sophia didn't grow up around wealth. She didn't understand silk table linens or $20,000 clutches. But she understood people. She understood emotions. She understood pain. That's why she went into therapy. Not for the prestige, but for the purpose. She never cared for grand things, even when she met Nicholas. Nicholas Kane. Back then, he wasn't the headline-hungry mogul he would become. When they met, he was charming, passionate, and full of dreams. He was still building his tech company, working late nights out of a rented co-working space. They met at a charity silent auction for underfunded schools. Sophia had been invited last minute by a fellow therapist who couldn't attend. She had no plans to bid on anything. She barely had student loan payments under control. But she went anyway, lured by the promise of free snacks and quiet conversation. Nicholas spotted her by the horse doves table. She wore a knee-length thrifted dress, navy blue with a slightly crooked zipper. He said she looked like calm in a room full of noise. She laughed. He told her she had poet's eyes. She rolled her own. They talked all night, about childhood dreams, about their moms, about their fears. He told her he wanted to build technology that made people's lives better, not just richer. She told him about a 6-year-old boy who drew only in red and refused to speak after his father went to prison. They weren't from the same world, but something about the way he listened and the way she saw right through him created a pull neither of them could resist. Within months, they were inseparable. Nicholas proposed a year later, kneeling in a patch of sunflowers in a field outside Napa. The ring wasn't huge, but it was his grandmother's, and the moment was perfect. Sophia believed she was living a love story. She believed he saw her, not just as a partner, but as an anchor. She moved into his small condo. She made his favorite meals. She decorated their first office space with potted succulents and handmade signs that read things like "Innovation with Heart." She celebrated every funding round with him, every tech award, every late-night pitch rehearsal. And slowly, as his world expanded, hers shrank. She put her art therapy career on hold to help him travel, to be available when he needed her. She still volunteered, still taught kids to draw through their grief. But her own voice, her own needs, they got quieter. She didn't notice at first. That's the thing about losing yourself in love. It doesn't come like a fire. It comes like fog. The bigger Nicholas's company became, the more distracted he grew. His smiles grew shorter, his touches colder. Their late-night talks turned into late-night meetings, meetings she was no longer invited to. Sophia told herself it was just a phase, the stress of expansion, the burden of success. She told herself this even when he started dressing differently, talking differently, surrounding himself with people who valued wealth over wisdom. She still made excuses when he missed dinner, or forgot her birthday, or pulled away when she tried to kiss him in public. Because Sophia didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to believe the man she fell in love with, the man who once wrote her love letters on hotel notepads and made pancakes shaped like hearts, could disappear into power. Then she got pregnant. It was unexpected, not planned, but not unwelcome. When she saw the pink line, something in her lit up. Fear, yes, but also hope. She thought maybe this was what they needed, a reset, a reason to reconnect. When she told Nicholas, he stared at her for a full minute before finally saying, "That's wow. Okay." That night, he didn't come home. The pregnancy was rough, morning sickness, fatigue, loneliness. She attended her ultrasounds alone. She bought the crib alone. She talked to her belly more than she talked to her husband. Still, she didn't give up. She painted the nursery in soft yellows and kept sending Nicholas sonogram photos. He rarely replied. When she finally confronted him, really confronted him, he didn't deny it. There was someone else, younger, wilder, more aligned with his lifestyle. Sophia didn't cry that night. She didn't scream. She just sat there, her hands folded neatly in her lap, and listened to him describe how he'd outgrown their marriage. "I need someone who understands ambition," he'd said. You're stuck in comfort." That's when she knew. It wasn't that she wasn't enough. It was that he never truly saw her. He only saw what she gave him. And the moment she stopped giving, he started looking elsewhere. But what Nicholas Kane failed to realize, what he never paused long enough to consider, was that Sophia Kane was never just his support system. She was her own force. And the child she carried would carry more than just blood. They would carry her strength, her vision, her fire. The Montclair Grand Ballroom was a masterpiece of modern opulence. Towering archways framed with gold leaf opened into a sea of white marble, each tile polished to perfection until it reflected light like water. Crystal chandeliers hung from 30-foot ceilings, each one sparkling like frozen fireworks. The scent of imported roses, fresh from Ecuador, mingled with hints of caviar, champagne, and truffle oil from the caterers drifting through the air. This was not just any event, it was the Infinite Future Gala, an annual gathering of the world's wealthiest entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and philanthropic elites. The kind of people who donated millions over hors d'oeuvres and made business deals in between jazz sets. The theme that year was Innovation Meets Impact. Banners with bold fonts hung from the mezzanine, featuring portraits of tech leaders and their charitable foundations. Every guest received a program wrapped in silver ribbon, detailing the night's auction items and honorees, including, at the top of the list, Nicholas Kane. The very same Nicholas Kane who would moments later slap his pregnant wife in front of the entire room. But hours before that moment, before the gasp, the silence, the phones raised in disbelief, the evening began with glamour. Sophia Kane stood just inside the marble entrance, clutching a beaded clutch in one hand, the other resting lightly on her belly. She hadn't been to a gala in over a year. Her maternity dress, a custom pale blue silk design, hugged her figure modestly. She wore no diamonds, no glittering tiara, only small pearl earrings and a gentle dignity that somehow made her stand out more than the women dripping in gold. She almost hadn't come. Part of her wanted to skip it entirely. She knew Nicholas would be there with Kira, his 25-year-old strategic branding consultant, who was now far more than just an employee. But something inside Sophia had told her to go. Not to cause a scene, but to be seen. For the first time in months, she had done her makeup with care. Soft, smoky eyes, neutral lipstick. She curled her chestnut hair into waves that spilled down her back. It wasn't vanity, it was armor. As she stepped inside, people noticed. Not just because she was visibly pregnant, but because of her calm, her quiet strength, the kind of presence that made people whisper even if they didn't know why. "Is that Sophia Kane?" one woman whispered. "She looks incredible," murmured another. Sophia didn't hear them. She didn't need to. She walked slowly, deliberately, scanning the room until her eyes landed on him. Nicholas. He was holding court at the front of the room, near the silent auction tables. Surrounded by investors and influencers, he laughed loudly, his hand resting casually on the small of Kira's back. Kira wore a plunging red gown that clung to every curve, her blonde hair swept into a high ponytail. She looked like every stereotype of the woman who gets chosen second, but loves every minute of it. Sophia paused, her stomach tightening, not from fear but from something more primal. She moved toward the far side of the room, pretending not to see him. Her plan had been simple. Stay quiet, congratulate the right people, and leave. But fate, as it always does in stories like this, had other plans. A few minutes into the evening, the MC took the stage. Spotlights beamed down as he welcomed the guests. Tonight, he announced, we honor a visionary, a man who changed the world of tech, who invests not only in innovation, but in humanity. Please welcome Nicholas Kane. Applause erupted. Cameras turned. Nicholas adjusted his cufflinks, then began his slow, confident walk to the stage. Kira on his arm. He didn't see Sophia at first, but Kira did. Their eyes locked like gunfire across the room. Kira's smirk widened. She leaned in and whispered something into Nicholas's ear. That's when he turned. Their eyes met, and for a brief second the noise faded, the lights dimmed, and it was just the two of them. One man, one woman, 10 years of history. Nicholas didn't blink. He didn't smile. He stared at her like she was a problem that had followed him into his new world. Sophia didn't look away. When he reached the stage, Nicholas launched into his usual charm routine. Thanked his team, thanked the investors, thanked the audience, never once mentioned his wife. And as he stepped down, the room seemed to lean toward him, waiting to see what would happen next. Sophia had planned to leave then. She had promised herself she wouldn't get involved. But as Nicholas walked back into the crowd, Kira clinging to him like a badge of conquest, something in Sophia cracked. She walked toward them. Not fast, not storming, just steady. And when Nicholas turned and saw her approaching, his face froze. "What are you doing here?" he hissed. "I was invited," she said evenly, "like every year." Kira rolled her eyes. She probably thought this was a school fundraiser. The insult barely registered. Sophia kept her gaze on Nicholas. "Congratulations," she said, nodding to the plaque in his hand. The speech was nice, a little ironic, but nice. "Leave," Nicholas whispered sharply. "Now." "You're making a scene," Kira added. Then came the moment no one could take back. Nicholas stepped closer to her. Too close. And with the entire ballroom watching, phones already raised, he raised his hand and struck her. A slap that echoed through more than just air, through history, through hearts, gasps, screams. Chairs scraped the marble. Sophia didn't fall. She straightened and said only one thing. "You'll regret that." Nicholas Kane was once considered the ideal modern mogul, a visionary, a man who climbed out of a tiny rented studio apartment in Brooklyn and rose to dominate the tech world. His software company, Kaneverse, became a household name after revolutionizing remote work platforms. By 35, he was on the cover of Time magazine. By 37, he was giving TED Talks about digital empathy. But behind the sleek suits and polished sound bites was a man no one really knew, except Sophia, and she knew him too well. Nicholas had always had a hunger in his eyes, even during the early days when he would cook pasta in their tiny kitchen and promise he was doing it all for them, for there was a fire in him that never settled. He was obsessed with winning, not just financially, emotionally. He didn't just want to succeed. He wanted to be envied. At first, Sophia mistook that ambition for drive. She supported him, defended him, forgave his long absences, his sharp words, his rising ego. Even when he started making subtle jabs at her career and therapy, "You help kids draw pictures while I close billion-dollar deals," she brushed it off. She told herself he was stressed, that success was changing him, that if she just stayed patient, he'd come back to her. He didn't. Instead, he found someone new, and not quietly. Kira Sloan entered their lives through a rebranding campaign. She was hired to revamp Kaneverse's image, more bold, more daring, more Gen Z. Sophia met her once in a boardroom filled with glass and tension. Kira wore a white blazer with nothing underneath. She greeted Sophia with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and called her sweetheart like they were old friends. Sophia didn't miss the way Kira leaned into Nicholas during the meeting, or how Nicholas kept glancing at her lips. It didn't take long after that for things to unravel. Nicholas stopped coming home on weekends, stopped touching Sophia, stopped pretending. The first time she asked him directly, "Are you cheating on me?" he laughed, a soft, cruel laugh. "You always make everything so dramatic," he said. "It's just work." But it wasn't just work. It was Kira. And Sophia knew it. She found hotel receipts, a lipstick-stained cocktail napkin in his jacket pocket, a message on his phone, "I missed last night already," from a contact saved as Kevin. When she confronted him again, there was no more denial, no more lies. "Yes," he said flatly, "and no, I'm not sorry." He didn't apologize. He didn't try to explain. He didn't ask for forgiveness. Instead, he accused her of being the problem. "You've changed," he said. You used to be exciting. Now all you do is nest and whine and act like your pregnancy gives you moral authority. Newsflash, it doesn't. Sophia stood in their kitchen that night, heart pounding, belly heavy, hands shaking, and Nicholas? He packed a bag and left without looking back. The next day, tabloids exploded. Tech titan Nicholas Kane spotted with mystery blonde. A week later, meet Kira Sloan, Kane versus sexy new muse? Photos followed, of Nicholas and Kira in Malibu, kissing on a yacht, holding hands at a fashion show. The world devoured their affair like candy. And Sophia? She became a ghost, erased from the narrative. Even their shared friends distanced themselves. Whispers began. Maybe she was boring. He outgrew her. She was just a therapist. What did she expect? But Kira Sloan wasn't just a mistress. She was a strategist. She knew how to play every angle. On Instagram, in boardrooms, on red carpets. She posted vague captions like, "Don't settle for safe when you can have spectacular," with photos of her wrapped in Nicholas's arms. She gave interviews subtly painting herself as misunderstood. And behind closed doors, she told Nicholas to cut Sophia off financially. "She'll be fine," Kira said. "She'll figure it out. Focus on us." Nicholas listened. Sophia's credit cards were frozen. Her car, leased under Nicholas's name, was repossessed while she was at a prenatal checkup. The mortgage on the home they shared was suddenly under renegotiation, and her name was quietly removed from the title. Sophia was 7 months pregnant, and she was being erased. But what neither Nicholas nor Kira understood, what they completely underestimated, was that betrayal doesn't destroy a woman like Sophia. It awakens her. She didn't scream or beg. She didn't go to the press. She didn't even reply to the tabloid requests. She just started planning, quietly, intelligently, with the same patience she once used to help children find their voice through art. Nicholas had taken her comfort, but not her power. And Kira? For all her designer clothes and public confidence, she couldn't hide the fact that she was still a shadow standing in Sophia's light. The night of the gala, the moment Sophia walked in, Kira knew. She saw it in Nicholas's eyes. The moment he saw Sophia standing at the entrance in that soft silk dress, glowing with quiet defiance, something shifted. It was the first time he'd looked uncertain in weeks. And Kira felt it. That's why she pushed him. That's why she whispered, "Are you really going to let her ruin this night?" That's why Nicholas raised his hand, not just out of anger, but out of fear, because deep down he knew he had made a grave mistake. And Sophia? She was done staying silent. The moment would be replayed a million times, from phone screens to primetime news, pixelated, slowed down, dissected frame by frame. But nothing could compare to what it felt like being there. Right there, under the gold chandeliers of the Montclair Ballroom, right in the middle of New York's wealthiest crowd, right in front of CEOs, journalists, influencers, and investors. When Nicholas Kane slapped his pregnant wife, the sound echoed like thunder over a glassy lake. Sophia Kane didn't fall, but the way she stood, still, stunned, one hand over her cheek, the other over her belly, pierced the air like a silent scream. Her calm grace made the act feel even more barbaric. The world didn't just witness a slap. They witnessed an unraveling. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then came the gasp, the ripple of hands over mouths, the flash of phone cameras. Some tried to pretend they didn't see. Others turned away out of fear or cowardice. But a few brave souls stood frozen, their eyes wide in horror. Even the string quartet had stopped mid-note. Nicholas, breathing hard, didn't seem to understand the gravity of what he'd just done. "You think you can show up here and embarrass me?" he hissed, stepping toward Sophia again, like he still had control. Kira Sloan, his mistress, didn't stop him. In fact, she smirked. She stood tall in her red dress, a glass of Dom Perignon in hand, eyes gleaming with cruel delight. She whispered something under her breath, something only those closest to her could hear. "She's always had a flair for drama." That comment, later captured on a hot mic from a nearby TV reporter, would be played endlessly, quoted in articles, condemned across the internet. But Sophia didn't respond. Not to the slap, not to the whisper, not to the crowd now circling like vultures unsure whose side they were supposed to be on. Instead, she took a breath, straightened her spine, and said, "You're going to regret this." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The words hung in the air like prophecy. She turned and walked away. Her heels clicked rhythmically against the marble floor. the sound echoing through the stunned silence. No one tried to stop her. No one dared. Security didn't move. The event coordinator froze. Kira raised her eyebrows as if amused, while Nicholas watched Sophia disappear into the crowd, his chest heaving with a mix of rage and something else, panic. Because somewhere, in the depths of his ego, he knew. He had gone too far. The night unraveled after that. People whispered in corners, debating what to do. Someone called the board of the Kane Foundation. Someone else alerted the PR team. Within minutes, damage control went into full spin. She provoked him. She's emotionally unstable. She's hormonal. But the videos told the truth. The videos, captured from 5 different angles, within minutes uploaded to every platform imaginable, showed a calm, pregnant woman being struck by her husband. And the internet doesn't forget. By midnight, the hashtags had started trending. Justice for Sophia, Kane cancelled, pregnant and powerful. At home, Sophia sat on her living room couch, wrapped in a blanket, barely speaking. Her sister Eliza had picked her up from the gala, clutching her like glass the entire ride home. Sophia hadn't cried. Not yet. She just sat there, her hand gently resting on her stomach, staring blankly at the dark TV screen. "You should go to the police," Eliza said, pacing the room, "or the press, or file a restraining order, something." Sophia shook her head. "Not yet." "But he hit you, Sophia. In public. With that woman right there." "I know," she said quietly. "Do you want revenge?" Sophia's eyes slowly lifted to meet her sister's. They weren't red. They weren't wild. They were focused. "I want truth," she said. "I want the world to see what he really is. And I want our child to know I didn't break." That was all she said. The next morning, she woke to hundreds of missed calls. Journalists, lawyers, activists, strangers, women who had seen the video and wanted to stand with her. But Sophia didn't post anything. She didn't go live. She didn't do interviews. She did something else. She called her old mentor, Julia Rivera, a renowned human rights artist, and asked for canvas, paint, and silence. Then she began to paint. In her sunlit studio, surrounded by baby clothes and unopened gifts from baby showers she never had, she painted what she remembered. Not just the slap, but the moment, the colors, the stillness, the cruelty, the truth. What came out was a masterpiece, a raw, haunting scene. Sophia, mid-turn, with a soft glow over her belly. Nicholas's hand in motion, caught between violence and regret. Kira's smile painted like a slash of red against the backdrop of glittering chandeliers and cold, watching eyes. It was titled simply, "The Moment." And when her baby was born, 2 months later, healthy, strong, beautiful, Sophia submitted the painting in her child's name to the International Motherhood and Art Showcase. No one expected it to win. But it did. Not just the showcase, but every category. Critics called it the most important painting of the decade. News anchors called it a revolution in color. And Sophia? She stayed quiet, because the art said everything. The following days after the gala felt like walking through glass. Sophia Kane woke up to the sound of her name trending across the internet, but her body still trembled from the slap. Not from the physical sting, it had faded, but from the emotional weight it left behind. Betrayal didn't leave bruises on the skin, it carved into the soul. The walls of her townhouse felt colder now. The nursery she had so lovingly painted in soft yellows now looked like a hollow fantasy. The tiny clothes folded on the dresser, the ones with ducks and clouds, felt like props from a life that wasn't hers anymore. Sophia sat in bed for hours, staring at the sunlight pouring through the curtains. Her phone buzzed non-stop, messages from strangers, some offering support, some begging for interviews, some just sending stories of their own heartbreaks. She ignored them all. She didn't have the strength to explain herself, to speak, to be anything but still. Eliza came by daily, trying to coax her out of bed, sometimes with soup, sometimes with firm words, sometimes with a hug. But Sophia stayed quiet. "I just want to disappear," she whispered once. Eliza knelt beside her bed, her voice cracking. "You don't get to. You're not done yet." But Sophia felt done. She felt broken in places she couldn't name. Even simple things became impossible. Brushing her teeth, eating, standing too long. She was 8 months pregnant, and her body ached. Her heart ached more. She thought about the night she met Nicholas, the way he looked at her like she was magic. She remembered their first apartment, their inside jokes, how he'd make her pancakes shaped like hearts. How did it all become this? A slap, a mistress, a viral scandal. Every time she tried to move, memories pinned her down. One afternoon, she wandered into the nursery and sat on the floor, her back against the crib. She stared at the wall where she'd painted a tree. It had bright leaves and tiny birds. A tree full of life. But now it felt like a lie. Tears came then. Heavy, ugly sobs that racked her entire body. She cried for herself, for her baby, for the woman she used to be. She cried until her breath came in hiccups, until her throat burned, until she couldn't cry anymore. And even then, she kept sitting. The world outside kept spinning. News anchors debated the ethics of filming trauma. Feminist leaders cited her case as a wake-up call. Protesters stood outside Caneverse headquarters demanding justice. Nicholas issued a cold public apology, saying it was a moment of stress. Kira posted a cryptic Instagram story. Some people need drama to stay relevant. Sophia didn't respond. She watched it all like a movie playing without her. People assumed she was plotting revenge, but the truth was, she didn't know what to do next. She felt nothing, and everything. All at once. Then came the night she collapsed. She was alone in the kitchen, trying to warm up soup. Her hands were shaking from days of barely eating. As she reached for the pot, a sharp pain shot through her back. Her knees buckled. She hit the floor hard. She lay there staring at the ceiling, too scared to scream. One hand flew to her belly, feeling the baby move, thank God. The other reached for her phone, but it had fallen under the counter. She couldn't reach it. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps. This is it, she thought. This is how it ends. Then she heard pounding at the door. Her sister's voice. Sophia! Open up. Eliza had been calling. When Sophia hadn't answered, she'd driven over. She found the door unlocked and ran in to see Sophia on the tile floor, her lips pale, tears pooling at the corners of her eyes. An ambulance was called. Sophia was taken in on a stretcher, clutching her stomach like a shield. At the hospital, tests were run. The baby was okay, but Sophia was dehydrated, malnourished, and emotionally exhausted. The doctor's words were clinical but clear. You need to rest, Mrs. Kane. You're in survival mode. Sophia turned her head away. She didn't want to survive. She wanted to live. But she didn't know how to anymore. That night, she lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling tiles. It was quiet, except for the gentle beep of the monitor and the baby's heartbeat echoing in the room. That sound, steady and strong, did something to her. She realized she wasn't alone. That tiny rhythm, that little life inside her, it was counting on her. And that's when something inside Sophia shifted. She wasn't ready to fight yet, but she wasn't going to give up. Not for her baby, not for herself. The next morning, Eliza brought her a sketch pad. You don't have to talk, she said gently. Just draw. At first, Sophia stared at the blank page like it was a stranger. But slowly, she picked up the pencil. Her hands moved without thought. She drew a face, hers. Eyes red, hair messy, tears streaming, then another page, the slap, then another, the moment after, and then color. The first color she had touched in weeks, a soft blue, a bold red, a gold chandelier. She didn't know it yet, but she was starting to heal. Not with revenge, but with creation, with truth, with art. It started with an envelope. A plain, cream-colored envelope slid under Sophia Kane's hospital room door in the middle of the night. No name, no return address. Just her first name written in delicate script, Sophia. At first, she thought it was another sympathy letter. Since the gala scandal, people had sent everything from handwritten poems to flower arrangements that filled entire rooms. She didn't open most of them. Her heart wasn't ready. But something about this envelope felt different. It was heavier and personal. She waited until morning before opening it. Sunlight poured in through the blinds as she tore the seal. Inside was a single letter and a document attached with a gold paperclip. Sophia, I know what he did, and I know who you really are. You don't need to suffer in silence anymore. It's time you remembered what you're capable of. The trust your grandmother created is still active. Everything is waiting for you. The world sees you as a victim. Let's remind them who you really are. Jasper Flint. Sophia blinked at the name. Jasper Flint, her family's former attorney, the man who had managed her grandmother's estate after her passing, the man who had promised to disappear unless she ever needed him again. And now he was back. She read the attached documents carefully. At first, her hands shook. Then her breath caught. It was all still there. The inheritance, the assets, the dormant investments in Swiss banks. The shares in the green energy conglomerate her grandmother had helped build. The multi-million-dollar property trust in her name. All of it. Untouched. Hidden behind legal protections. She hadn't touched a dime of it when she married Nicholas. She hadn't wanted him to know. Back then, she thought hiding her wealth would prove she wasn't like the women who chased power. She thought living simply was a way to build something real. She never told Nicholas. She never told anyone. She had left behind billions for love. And now she saw what love had cost her. Sophia closed the folder. Her fingers curled tightly around the pages. Her mind began to shift, reorganizing itself like a machine being rewired. She wasn't a broken woman anymore. She was a billionaire who had been betrayed, and she was done hiding. That afternoon, she called Jasper. His voice was the same as she remembered, calm, clipped, endlessly professional. "It's good to hear from you, Mrs. Kane." "It's Ms. Laurent now," she said. "I'm ready to reactivate the trust, but I want everything moved under a different name." "I anticipated that." "Shall we use the child's?" "Yes," she said. "Name the account after my baby." She hadn't even given birth yet, but already she was laying the foundation for something more powerful than revenge, a legacy. Within days, her world shifted behind the scenes. Bankers were called, properties were reassigned, security was arranged, and most importantly, Jasper connected her with a media team. Not for interviews, but for strategy. "I don't want to explain myself," Sophia said. "I want the truth to speak through art." He nodded. "Understood. But just so you know, Kaneverse stock has dropped 14% since the incident. Shareholders are questioning Nicholas's leadership." "Let them." She didn't need to attack him. He was doing it to himself. Nicholas still hadn't reached out, not to apologize, not to check on the baby, not to ask how she was coping. But she heard whispers. His team was scrambling, his brand deals were on pause, several nonprofits had severed ties, investors were nervous, he was losing control, and he had no idea just how bad it was going to get. Because Sophia wasn't just healing, she was rebuilding. With every brushstroke, every sketch, every canvas she filled in her new private studio, funded by the very fortune she once ran from. She found herself again. She painted without limits, scenes of strength, of mothers, of silence, of fire. One painting in particular stood out. It was titled Inheritance. A woman holding her baby, behind her, flames, in front of her, a mountain of gold. But her gaze, steady, unflinching, looked not at the gold or the fire, but straight at the viewer, daring them to look away. Sophia didn't submit it under her name. She entered the piece in an international contest under her unborn child's name, Elle Laurent. The theme of the contest was resilience. She never expected to win. But weeks later, she received the call. "You've been selected as the grand prize winner," the voice on the phone said. "It's the most powerful submission we've received in years." The painting would be displayed at the Global Museum of Modern Art, and it would tour internationally. When the press release went out, Sophia didn't make a statement. But the art world was stunned. Who is Elle Laurent? Became a trending search term. And Nicholas? He didn't find out until a reporter shoved a photo in his face at a press event. "Any comment on the award-winning painting by Elle Laurent? Sources say the child may be yours." Nicholas stared at the image, the woman, the baby, the fire. He froze. And that's when it hit him. He hadn't just lost his wife. He'd awakened a legacy he could never control. Sophia Kane, no, Sophia Laurent, no longer moved like someone uncertain. The soft, hesitant steps she used to take, always careful not to make things worse, had been replaced with the confident rhythm of a woman who knew exactly where she was going. Her walk had power now. Her voice, when she chose to use it, landed like a hammer wrapped in silk. It had been 5 weeks since the art contest went public, since the painting Inheritance began its world tour. Sophia still hadn't spoken to any media outlet. She had no need to. The public was already on her side. Victim turned visionary, artist turned activist, billionaire by bloodline. But behind the scenes, the real transformation was happening. It started with her wardrobe. Gone were the soft, forgettable dresses she once wore to fade into Nicholas's shadow. In their place, sharp silhouettes, crisp white blazers, structured gowns with fierce necklines. Nothing too flashy, just the kind of style that said, "I'm not trying to impress you. I already won." Her team, handpicked by Jasper, was small but lethal. A lawyer, a strategist, and a silent investor from Geneva who owed her grandmother a favor. Together, they built a new foundation in her baby's name, the Laurent Initiative. Its mission? Protect and empower women navigating abuse during pregnancy. In less than a month, it raised $4.6 million in pledges. The first gala was set, and Sophia would be the guest of honor. But it wasn't just about making a statement. It was about reclaiming the spaces she once tiptoed through. Taking up space, breathing without apology, living fully. She had moved out of the townhouse, too many ghosts. Now she lived in a glass-walled penthouse overlooking Central Park, a property held in a silent trust for years. The floors were walnut. The art was hers. The crib in the nursery was hand-carved maple. She would bring her baby into a new kind of home, one with no secrets, no begging for love, no walking on eggshells. Her therapist said this transformation was rare, not because women weren't capable of rising, but because so many didn't get the chance. "You caught yourself," she said once, "before the world erased you." But Sophia didn't feel lucky. She felt focused. The revenge everyone expected never came, not in the way Nicholas thought it would. She didn't sue him, didn't ruin him publicly. She didn't need to. He was unraveling just fine on his own. Caneverse stock plummeted another 22%. Several executives resigned. Photos of Nicholas looking disheveled in airports surfaced weekly. Kira posted less often. Her tone had shifted, more defensive, more cryptic. "People will twist anything. I'm just trying to live my truth," she wrote under a post that got 84,000 hate comments. But Sophia, she remained silent. Until the night of the Laurent Gala. That was the moment everything changed again. The gala was held at the Rosewood Conservatory, marble halls, glass ceilings, and candlelight flickering in crystal holders. The guest list included Fortune 500 CEOs, global philanthropists, and several major press outlets. But all eyes were on the woman who entered last, Sophia. She arrived in a floor-length black velvet gown, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun. No jewelry except a diamond ring on her right hand, her grandmother's. She didn't speak to the cameras, just walked, tall and radiant, into the space she now owned. When she took the stage, the room fell silent. "I was told," she began, "that silence is strength, that dignity means saying nothing when you're hurt, but I disagree." Her voice was steady, low, controlled. "True strength is speaking, creating, rebuilding." She paused. "I've been many things, daughter, therapist, wife, but today I stand here as a mother, and this legacy is for my child, and for every woman who thought silence was the only way to survive." Thunderous applause. Later, backstage, an executive from the Global Women's Council approached her with an offer to become an ambassador. A fashion house offered a campaign. A museum wanted a solo exhibit. She accepted none of them. "I'm not a brand," she said quietly. "I'm a builder." And she meant it. Over the next month, Sophia hired 10 women, each one a survivor, artists, coders, lawyers, mothers. She funded their projects, their dreams, their healing. And in private, she prepared for birth. There were still hard nights, still shadows, still moments when she looked at her baby bump and felt waves of fear. But then she remembered the slap, the silence, the moment everything shattered, and she'd place her hand on her belly and whisper, "We survived." She went into labor early one morning. No cameras, no entourage. Just Eliza holding her hand and a delivery room that smelled like lavender and courage. The baby came screaming into the world, tiny fists raised, lungs strong, a girl. Sophia held her close, tears falling freely now, and whispered, "You are mine, and I am yours. We build from here." The birth certificate listed one parent, Sophia Laurent, and under name of child, Luna Laurent, L for legacy and light. It wasn't a courtroom. It wasn't a screaming match. It wasn't a dramatic press conference. It was a gallery. The Laurent Foundation had announced its first official international exhibition, titled Mothers of Resistance. The event would be held at the Astoria Hall in Manhattan, an elite venue typically reserved for royalty-level donors and world leaders. But on that Thursday night, it belonged to Sophia Laurent. The invitation-only crowd buzzed with anticipation. Rumors had already spread that the artist behind the viral painting Inheritance, L. Laurent, was somehow connected to Sophia. But no one could prove it, until that night. The gallery itself was drenched in soft gold lighting, each painting hung with a single spotlight. Guests wandered from one image to the next in silence, reading titles like The Invisible Bride, Bruises You Can't See, and room 328. In the center of the room, veiled by white silk, stood the newest piece. The crowd gathered around it as Sophia took the stage. She wore an ivory suit tailored with razor-sharp edges. In her arms was her newborn daughter, Luna, wrapped in soft cream cloth. Her presence alone silenced the room. "I was told once that to survive pain, you must forget it," she began. "But I think survival is not about forgetting. It's about making it unforgettable, for the right reasons." A spotlight moved toward the silk-covered frame. Sophia looked down at her daughter, then back at the audience. "And tonight," she continued, "I share with you the moment that made me, that nearly broke me, that gave birth to her." With a nod, the silk fell. The room gasped. There it was, the slap. Frozen in paint, reimagined in stunning, brutal detail. Sophia, her face mid-turn, one hand on her swollen belly. Nicholas, hand raised. Kira in the background, blurry, irrelevant. The chandelier gleamed above them like a cruel halo. The piece was titled Breaking Point. The plaque read, "Artist L. Laurent, medium, oil on canvas. Owned and exhibited by the Laurent Foundation. Donated by Sophia Laurent." Nicholas had not been invited, but he came anyway. Of course he did. He arrived late, wearing his signature black coat and a desperate expression. He hadn't seen the piece until the moment it was revealed. And when he did, the color drained from his face. He moved closer, mouth slightly open, almost in disbelief. The crowd parted for him like smoke. Someone snapped a photo of the moment, him staring at the painting that immortalized his downfall. Later, it would be shared with the caption, "This is what accountability looks like." Nicholas stood frozen in front of the painting. Then his voice broke the silence. This is slander." Sophia didn't flinch. She walked calmly toward him, her daughter still in her arms. "This is truth," she said, "and the world finally sees it." Nicholas's jaw clenched. "You're trying to destroy me." "I don't have to," she replied, her voice cool. "You did that yourself. I just painted it." Then, calmly, she turned her back to him and walked away. The cameras didn't follow him. They followed her. Sophia gave a brief statement to the press outside the gallery. "I didn't make this exhibit for revenge. I made it for clarity, for justice, for my daughter, and for every woman who's been silenced, slapped, or shamed into staying quiet." The next morning, headlines dominated every feed. Sophia Laurent reveals she's behind L. Laurent art, the slap immortalized. Caneverse CEO humiliated by ex-wife's award-winning exhibit. From silence to spotlight, Sophia's masterpiece destroys Nicholas Kane. But the biggest blow wasn't public. It came privately. The Laurent Foundation announced it had acquired 4.8% of Caneverse stock. Enough to request a shareholder vote, enough to demand accountability, enough to push Nicholas out. The board didn't hesitate. His approval ratings had tanked. His recent behavior had cost them millions. And Sophia? She didn't just hold the pen now. She held the vote. The board met within the week. Sophia didn't attend in person. She submitted her proxy vote with a letter that simply read, "I believe Caneverse needs to return to its original vision, empathy through innovation, and that starts with new leadership." The vote passed. Nicholas Kane was ousted. Just like that. The man who once slapped his pregnant wife at a gala now found himself removed from his own empire, voted out by the woman he tried to silence. And Kira? She quietly deleted her social media accounts a day later. No more cryptic captions. No more red carpet appearances. She vanished from the narrative as quickly as she entered it. Justice didn't come with fireworks. It came with stillness, with clarity, with a woman reclaiming her power. Not with fists or fury, but with art. The painting Breaking Point now hangs in the National Museum of Modern Art under tight security, constantly surrounded by visitors, educators, and students. It's studied in universities, quoted in activism seminars, admired by survivors across the world. But Sophia, she doesn't dwell on it. She's busy raising Luna, teaching her to speak boldly, teaching her to paint without fear, teaching her that sometimes the most powerful form of revenge is telling the truth beautifully. There's a quiet kind of strength that doesn't shout, it doesn't throw punches, it doesn't make noise, it stands, it breathes, it endures. Sophia Laurent didn't rebuild her life with vengeance in her heart. She rebuilt it with purpose, with clarity, with love. And as the sun rose on a quiet Sunday morning in her penthouse overlooking Central Park, she sat at her kitchen table, feeding her daughter a bottle, whispering stories about stars and colors and softness. Luna cooed, eyes wide and bright, fingers gripping her mother's hand like she already understood the legacy she had been born into. A legacy of resistance, of truth, of rebirth. Sophia had learned many things in the months following that infamous gala, but perhaps the most important truth was this. Women are not fragile. They bend, they break, they bleed, but they rise. Every time. She'd become a symbol, yes, a beacon, some called her. But she was more than that. She was proof. Proof that it is possible to lose everything and still create something extraordinary. That dignity doesn't come from silence. It comes from survival with grace. She never set out to inspire a movement. She just refused to disappear. Her inbox was now filled daily with messages from women across the world. I left because of you. You helped me speak out. I found my courage watching you stand still in that painting. But Sophia always replied the same way. You had it in you all along. The Laurent Foundation continued to grow, now with chapters in 5 countries. It provided legal assistance, therapy, and emergency housing for pregnant women escaping abuse. Every story added to Sophia's fuel, not because she saw herself as a savior, but because she saw herself in them. And while Nicholas Kane faded quietly into tech obscurity, his name mentioned less and less with each financial quarter, Sophia's grew stronger. But she never chased the spotlight. She kept her focus on Luna, on healing, on building. She often walked with Luna through the exhibit halls where her paintings now hung. She'd point to inheritance and whisper, "You saved me, little one. You gave me something to protect, even when I didn't know how to protect myself." Luna would reach out with chubby hands drawn to the colors. Sophia's heart swelled every time. In an interview months later, her first and only public sit-down, a journalist asked, "If you could go back and stop the slap from happening, would you?" Sophia paused for a long moment. Then she said, "No." The interviewer blinked. "No? I wouldn't stop it?" Sophia repeated. "Because the slap wasn't the worst part. The worst part was who I had to become to survive before that night. I was disappearing for years. That moment was just the spark that lit the fire I'd been burying." She leaned in then. Sometimes pain is the most honest mirror. The clip went viral. But it wasn't the soundbite that people remembered. It was the way she looked into the camera. Fierce, free. A woman who had nothing to prove, but everything to say. That evening, the young artist from Brazil painted Sophia holding Luna under a halo of broken glass and stars. She titled it, "She Stood Anyway." It became the cover of a new feminist art anthology. Sophia didn't know. She was at home, asleep beside her daughter. The truth is, she didn't need the world's applause. She already had what mattered. She had become the woman she needed when she was breaking. The kind of woman little girls would look up to, not for being perfect, but for being real. And the story, it didn't end with revenge. It didn't end with courtrooms or awards. It ended in peace and in a promise that no woman, no matter how forgotten, how betrayed, how quiet, would ever have to stand alone again. As Luna slept that night, wrapped in a soft blanket with sunflowers embroidered on the edge, Sophia whispered into the darkness, "You will grow up knowing that your mother didn't stay down, that she stood even when it hurt, that she built something beautiful from something brutal. Because that's what women do. They turn pain into power, silence into art, and trauma into truth. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real happy ending. Not the applause, not the gallery walls, but a little girl growing up never having to wonder what strength looks like. Because she will have seen it in every brushstroke, every story, every breath of the woman who brought her into the world." So the story has ended. Our wonderful friends, are you still here with me right now? If you're still watching until this very moment, then I know somewhere deep inside you felt something. Maybe a whisper, maybe a wave, but it touched your heart, and that matters. This story wasn't just about betrayal or revenge. It was about reclaiming yourself, even when the world tries to erase you. As the philosopher from the school of heterodoxism once said, healing is not becoming who you were before. It's about creating someone stronger with the pieces. So if you've ever been broken, or silenced, or made to feel small, please remember, your comeback can be louder than the pain. If this story moved you, like it. Share it with someone who needs it. And don't forget to subscribe. And hey, drop a comment. Tell us your story. We're listening, always.
Minutes after she delivered twins, her millionaire husband left to marry another woman. The sterile hospital room fell silent except for the gentle cries of newborn twins. Mia's exhausted body trembled as she cradled her babies, tears of joy streaming down her face. But her husband Julian stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes cold as winter steel. Without a word, he approached the bed and placed a manila envelope beside her. "Divorce papers," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I want you to sign them. Now." Julian Hale hadn't always been the millionaire CEO whose signature could reshape industries. He'd clawed his way up from a rundown apartment where the heating never worked and dinner was often whatever he could afford with loose change. Every rejection letter, every closed door, every night spent working 3 jobs had forged him into a man who refused to accept defeat. Hale Industries became his monument to persistence. What started as a single construction contract grew into an empire that touched everything from luxury real estate to innovative technology. But success, Julian discovered, was a lonely companion. The boardroom victories felt hollow when there was no one to share them with. The Meridian Charity Gala changed everything. Julian attended these events more from obligation than passion. Wealthy donors were expected to make appearances, write checks, and smile for photographs. He was adjusting his tie, already planning his escape when she walked into the ballroom. "Welcome back, Golden Family, to my incredible subscribers who make this journey possible. Thank you for being here. Your support means everything, and today's story will remind you why authentic love always wins in the end, so please stay with me till the end." Mia Reynolds moved like poetry in motion. Her midnight blue dress hugged every curve with elegant precision, but it was her eyes that stopped Julian cold. They held intelligence, ambition, and a spark of defiance that suggested she'd earned every bit of success in her own right. She wasn't looking for a rich husband. She was building her own dreams. "That's Mia Reynolds," his business partner Marcus whispered. "Interior designer. She's transforming the downtown district one building at a time. Word is she turns down more clients than she accepts." Julian watched her move through the crowd, confident and graceful. She commanded attention without demanding it, spoke with passion about her work, and when wealthy men tried to impress her with their bank accounts, she politely redirected conversations to their achievements instead. "Excuse me," Julian found himself saying as he approached her near the silent auction display. "I couldn't help but notice you're admiring the architecture prints." Mia turned, and when their eyes met, Julian felt something shift in his chest. Her smile was warm but guarded. "I am. The detail work is extraordinary. Are you a collector?" "Julian Hale?" He extended his hand. "And no, I'm more of a builder than a collector. Though I'm beginning to appreciate the artistry more." Mia Reynolds. Her handshake was firm, confident. "And what do you build, Julian Hale?" "Dreams mostly. Sometimes they happen to be constructed of steel and glass." She laughed, genuine, musical. "That's either the most romantic thing I've heard tonight or the cheesiest pickup line in history." "I was hoping for romantic." Jury's still out. They talked until the gala ended and the staff began clearing tables around them. Julian learned that Mia had started her design firm with a loan she'd fought 3 banks to approve. She'd spent years proving that her vision could transform spaces and lives. Her work wasn't just about making rooms beautiful. It was about creating environments where people could thrive. "Would you have dinner with me?" Julian asked as they stood in the parking garage beside her car. Mia hesitated. "I don't typically date clients. I haven't hired you. Yet." "Then say yes before I make you an offer you can't refuse." She laughed again and Julian knew he was already falling. "One dinner, Julian Hale. But I picked the restaurant." She chose a small Italian place where the owner knew every customer's name and the wine came from his family's vineyard. Julian had expected her to test him with some exclusive establishment where reservations required connections. Instead, she wanted authentic conversation over handmade pasta. "You're not what I expected," he admitted over candlelight that made her eyes sparkle like stars. "What did you expect?" "Someone impressed by what I own rather than who I am." Mia leaned forward, her voice soft but direct. "Julian, I've built my career in a world where men assume I'm someone's assistant or decorator. I've learned to see through surface impressions quickly. Your success is impressive, but what interests me is how you earned it." Their connection was immediate and electric. Julian found himself calling her the next morning, not with some calculated strategy, but because he couldn't stop thinking about her laugh. Mia, despite her usual caution with wealthy suitors, felt drawn to his genuine curiosity about her work and dreams. Their courtship moved with the intensity of 2 ambitious people who recognized something rare. Julian would surprise her with lunch during her site visits, not to interrupt her work but to bring coffee and pastries for her entire team. Mia would text him photos of beautiful spaces she encountered, sharing the artistry that excited her. "You make me want to be better than I am," Julian told her one evening as they walked along the river after dinner. "You make me believe I can have both," Mia replied, taking his hand. "My career and someone who truly sees me." When they made love for the first time in his penthouse, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city they were both helping to build, it felt like claiming each other completely. Mia's touch ignited fires Julian didn't know existed. She was confident in her passion, demanding in her pleasure, generous with her affection. In her arms, success meant something different, not just what he could acquire but what they could create together. 3 months after that first dinner, Julian knew he couldn't live without her. The proposal came during a weekend at his lake house, not with fanfare or photographers, but during a quiet moment as they watched sunrise paint the water gold. "Marry me," he said simply, pulling her closer against his chest. Mia was quiet for so long that Julian's heart began to race with fear. Finally, she turned in his arms to face him. "Julian, we've known each other less than 6 months. People will say we're rushing. People don't live our lives, Mia. They don't feel what I feel when you smile, or know how empty my world was before you walked into it. What if we discover we want different things? Then we'll figure it out together. But I already know what I want. I want you, completely, forever. I want to build something beautiful with you that no one can tear down." When she said yes, Julian felt like he'd won something more valuable than any business deal. He slipped the ring onto her finger, a stunning emerald-cut diamond that caught the morning light like captured fire, and kissed her with all the passion and promise he possessed. Their wedding was intimate, held at the same lake house where he'd proposed, with only their closest friends and family present. Mia wore a simple white dress that made her look radiant, and when she walked down the makeshift aisle, Julian's eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. The early months of marriage were blissful perfection. Julian loved coming home to find Mia's design sketches scattered across their dining table, evidence of the dreams she was bringing to life. She loved how he would massage her shoulders after long days, listening to her excitement about new projects with genuine interest and intelligent questions. Every morning, Julian woke grateful for the woman beside him. Every evening, Mia fell asleep feeling completely cherished and understood. They were building something rare, a partnership where ambition and love strengthened each other instead of competing. But even in their paradise, subtle tensions were beginning to surface. Julian's desire for a family grew stronger each day as he watched fatherly instincts emerge when they visited friends with children. Meanwhile, Mia's career was reaching new heights that demanded her complete focus and energy. Neither realized how drastically their different dreams would test the love they'd built so carefully. The cracks were still hairline thin, barely visible, but they were there, waiting for the right pressure to split their perfect world apart. What do you think about couples who marry quickly? Sometimes when drop a comment about your thoughts on whirlwind romances and whether love at first sight can really last forever. The first sign of trouble came during a quiet Sunday morning in their penthouse. Julian was reading the financial section while Mia sketched designs for her latest project. A luxury hotel that could establish her firm as a major player in commercial design. The sun streamed through their floor-to-ceiling windows, and everything should have been perfect. "I was thinking," Julian said, folding his newspaper, "maybe it's time we started trying for a baby." Mia's pencil stopped moving. She looked up from her sketches, surprise flickering across her features. "A baby? Julian, we've been married 8 months. I know, and I love our life together. But I also know I want children with you. I want to see your eyes in our daughter's face, your determination in our son's spirit." The way he said it, with such tender certainty, made Mia's heart flutter. But it also sent a chill of panic through her chest. "Julian, my career is just taking off. The Meridian Hotel project could change everything for my firm. If I get pregnant now, we can hire help. The best nannies, whatever support you need." "It's not about help." Mia set down her pencil, choosing her words carefully. "Pregnancy, childbirth, nursing. My body won't be my own for over a year. And in my industry, if I disappear for that long, clients will move on. They'll assume I'm not serious about my work anymore." Julian reached across the table to take her hand. "Mia, you're brilliant. Your reputation is solid. 1 year won't erase everything you've built. You don't understand." She pulled her hand back, frustration creeping into her voice. "You're Julian Hale. When you take time off, people wait for you. When women in my position take time off, we get replaced. So we'll make sure that doesn't happen. I have influence, connections. I don't want to succeed because of your connections. Mia's voice was sharper now. I've worked too hard to build something that's mine. Julian felt the familiar sting of rejection, though he tried to hide it. I'm not asking you to give up your career. I'm asking you to start a family with me. Right now, those feel like the same thing. They didn't fight that day, but the conversation left a tension between them that hadn't existed before. Julian threw himself into work, staying late at the office more often. Mia accepted more projects, including several out-of-town consultations that kept her traveling. When they were together, they still made love with passion, but afterward, lying in the darkness, both felt the weight of unspoken expectations. Julian would trace patterns on Mia's skin and envision her pregnant with their child. Mia would feel his longing in every touch and worry that she was disappointing the man she loved. The tension exploded on a rainy Thursday evening in November. Julian came home to find Mia on a video call with a potential client in Seattle, discussing a year-long project that would require extensive travel. "Thank you, Mr. Patterson. I'll have my team prepare a full proposal," Mia was saying as Julian walked into their home office. After she hung up, Julian stood in the doorway watching her make notes. "Seattle? Patterson Industries wants me to redesign their entire corporate headquarters. It's a massive project, Julian. The kind of opportunity that comes once in a career. How long would you be gone?" "It would be ongoing for about 18 months. I'd probably need to be there 2 weeks out of every month." Julian felt something cold settle in his stomach. 18 months. "This could establish my firm nationally, Julian. After this, I could choose any project anywhere. And where does that leave us? Where does that leave the family we talked about?" Mia turned in her chair, and Julian could see the guilt in her eyes warring with her ambition. "We can wait a little longer. Once this project is complete, there'll be another project. There's always another project, Mia. Just like there's always another deal for you. That's different." "How is it different?" Mia stood, her voice rising. "How is your ambition more important than mine? Because I want to share my success with our children. I want to build something that matters beyond money and recognition. And I don't matter? My dreams don't matter?" "That's not what I said. It's what you meant." Mia's eyes flashed with hurt and anger. "You want me to become someone different? Someone who's satisfied with being Julian Hale's wife instead of Mia Reynolds, the designer." "I fell in love with Mia Reynolds. But I married her thinking she wanted to become Mia Hale in every sense." The words hung between them like a blade. Mia felt tears sting her eyes. "I did take your name, Julian. But I won't take your limitations. Wanting a family isn't a limitation. It's a dream. One I thought we shared. We do share it. Just not on your timeline." Julian ran his hands through his hair, frustration radiating from every line of his body. "I'm 35 years old, Mia. I spent 15 years building an empire, and for what? So I could die alone in a penthouse full of achievements that mean nothing without someone to pass them to? You won't be alone. You have me. Do I? Because lately, it feels like I have an appointment slot in your calendar." The accusation hit Mia like a physical blow. "That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time we had dinner together without you checking your phone? When was the last time we made love without you thinking about your next project? I could ask you the same thing about your deals. The difference is I'm ready to make room for more. You're not." Mia felt tears spill over. "I'm not ready to give up who I am. I'm not asking you to give up who you are. I'm asking you to become who we could be together." But even as he said it, Julian knew they were talking past each other. He saw a future where love and family were the foundation that made everything else meaningful. Mia saw that same future as a beautiful cage that would slowly erode everything she'd worked to build. "I need some air," Julian said finally. "I need to think." "Julian, wait." But he was already grabbing his keys, already walking toward the door. "Take the Seattle project if you want it, Mia. Apparently, that's more important than anything I can offer you." The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Mia sank into her chair, tears flowing freely now. She loved Julian desperately, but she also loved the woman she'd become through years of struggle and determination. Why couldn't he understand that giving up her career momentum now might mean never getting it back? Julian drove through the rain without destination, his hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him anchored. He'd built everything he had through sheer determination, but he couldn't force the woman he loved to want the same dreams he wanted. He ended up at Marcus's bar downtown, a place where successful men went to drink expensive whiskey and pretend their problems were as simple as closing deals. "You look like hell," Marcus observed, sliding a glass of Julian's usual across the mahogany bar. Feel worse. Mia? Julian nodded, taking a long drink. She wants Seattle. 18 months of travel. And you want babies. I want a family. I want to come home to something that matters more than profit margins. Marcus refilled his glass. Maybe she's scared. Of what? Of losing herself. You've seen what happens to ambitious women in our circles, Julian. They get married, have kids, and suddenly they're someone's wife instead of someone with their own identity. I would never do that to her. You might not mean to, but society would. Clients would. The whole world would start seeing her differently. Julian knew Marcus was right, but it didn't ease the ache in his chest. So what am I supposed to do? Pretend I don't want children? Pretend I'm satisfied with a marriage that feels more like a business partnership? You're supposed to figure out if you love her enough to wait. How long? Until she's 40? 45? Until it's too late. Marcus didn't have an answer for that. Julian stayed at the bar longer than he should have, letting expensive whiskey dull the sharp edges of his disappointment. When he finally stumbled out into the rain, his phone showed 3 missed calls from Mia and 2 text messages asking him to come home so they could talk. But Julian wasn't ready to talk. He was tired of talking. He was tired of being reasonable and understanding while his dreams kept getting pushed further into an uncertain future. That's when he saw her. Cassandra Vale stepped out of the upscale nightclub across the street, her red dress clinging to her curves like a second skin. She was exactly the kind of woman Julian had dated before Mia. Beautiful, sophisticated, and dangerously available. She'd been making subtle advances at various social events for months, advances that Julian had politely but firmly deflected. Tonight, with rain soaking through his shirt and whiskey clouding his judgment, those deflections seemed less important than the raw pain of feeling unwanted by his own wife. Julian? Cassandra's voice was silk and honey as she approached him on the sidewalk. You look like you could use some company. You should have said no. Should have gotten in his car and driven home to work things out with Mia. Should have remembered that the woman he'd married was worth fighting for, worth waiting for. Instead, he looked into Cassandra's predatory smile and made the decision that would destroy everything beautiful he'd ever built. Yeah, he said, his voice rough with whiskey and regret he didn't yet understand. Maybe I could. The rain kept falling as Julian Hale walked away from his marriage and toward a mistake that would cost him everything he truly loved. Have you ever made a decision in anger that you immediately regretted? Sometimes our worst moments come when we're hurting the most. Share your thoughts in the comments about how couples can navigate different dreams without losing each other. Julian woke in Cassandra's silk sheets with the taste of regret bitter in his mouth. Gray morning light filtered through her expensive curtains and for a moment he couldn't remember where he was. Then it all came rushing back. The fight with Mia, the whiskey, the rain, and the catastrophic decision that had led him here. Cassandra stretched beside him like a satisfied cat, her red hair spilled across the pillow. Good morning, handsome, she purred, running her fingers down his chest. Julian jerked away from her touch as if burned. This was a mistake. Felt pretty right to me. Her smile was predatory, triumphant. Multiple times if I recall correctly. Shame crashed over Julian in waves. He'd betrayed everything he believed about himself, everything he'd promised Mia. The woman he loved was at home, probably worried sick, while he'd spent the night in another woman's bed. This can never happen again, he said, pulling on his clothes with desperate urgency. Last night was... I wasn't thinking clearly. Oh, you were thinking plenty clearly. Cassandra sat up, not bothering to cover herself. You were thinking about how your wife cares more about her career than your marriage. How she keeps pushing away the family you want. Don't. Julian's voice was sharp. Don't talk about Mia. Why not? She obviously doesn't appreciate what she has. Cassandra rose and moved toward him, her body a weapon she wielded with practiced precision. I would never take you for granted, Julian. I understand what a man like you needs. Julian grabbed his keys from her nightstand. What I need is to go home and fix my marriage. And pretend this never happened? Yes. Cassandra's laugh was cold music. That's not how these things work, darling. But don't worry, your secret is safe with me. For now. The drive home was torture. Julian gripped the steering wheel, rehearsing apologies he wasn't sure he deserved to give. How could he look Mia in the eyes knowing what he'd done? How could he touch her with hands that had betrayed their vows? He found Mia in their kitchen, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Her eyes were red from crying, but when she saw him, relief flooded her features. Julian, thank God. I was so worried when you didn't come home. She moved toward him, and Julian had to force himself not to step away. I'm sorry about last night. I know you want children and I want them too, Mia, stop. The words came out harsher than he intended. He couldn't bear her apologies when he was the one drowning in guilt. I called Marcus. He said you left the bar hours ago. Where were you? Julian's throat felt like sandpaper. I drove around. Needed to clear my head. It was technically true. He had driven around before ending up at Cassandra's. But the lie of omission sat like poison in his stomach. I've been thinking about what you said, Mia continued, hope brightening her voice. Maybe we could compromise. I could take the Seattle project but structure it differently. Shorter trips, more remote work. Julian wanted to feel relief at her words, but all he felt was the crushing weight of his betrayal. That sounds good. We can talk about it. But they didn't talk about it. Julian threw himself into work with manic intensity, staying late every night to avoid going home and facing the wife he'd betrayed. When he was home, he was distant, distracted. Mia assumed he was still angry about their fight and gave him space to process. 3 weeks passed in this horrible limbo. Julian told himself the guilt would fade, that he could bury his mistake and rebuild his marriage. He was almost starting to believe it when Cassandra called. We need to meet, she said without preamble. Today. It's urgent. Julian's blood turned to ice. I told you. I'm pregnant. The world tilted sideways. Julian gripped his desk phone so hard his knuckles went white. What? You heard me. I'm carrying your child, Julian. That's impossible. We used protection. Protection isn't foolproof, darling. Surely a successful businessman like you understands statistics. Julian's mind raced. Have you taken a test? Seen a doctor? Both. The bottom dropped out of Julian's world. He'd wanted children desperately, but not like this. Not with a woman who meant nothing to him, not as the result of the worst decision he'd ever made. What do you want? He asked finally. To discuss our options. Meet me at the Meridian Hotel lobby in an hour. The line went dead. Julian sat in his office, staring at the phone like it was a loaded weapon. A child. He was going to be a father, but not with the woman he loved. The irony was so cruel it physically hurt. He found Cassandra in the hotel's elegant lobby, looking perfectly composed in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She rose to greet him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Julian, you look pale. Perhaps you should sit down. They found a quiet corner table, and Cassandra slid a manila envelope across the polished surface. Inside were medical reports, ultrasound images, confirmation of everything Julian prayed wasn't true. 6 weeks and 3 days, Cassandra said, studying his face as he examined the documents. Due in early summer. What do you want from me? Julian's voice was hollow. Recognition. Support. A future for our child. Financial support, you mean? Among other things. Cassandra leaned forward, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper. Julian, I know this is complicated. You have a wife, a reputation to protect. But this baby is innocent. They deserve a father who acknowledges them. Julian felt trapped in a nightmare. Mia can never know about this. That's up to you. But secrets have a way of coming out, especially when there's a child involved. Are you threatening me? I'm being realistic. How long do you think you can hide a pregnancy? A birth? A child who looks like you. Julian's hands shook as he set the documents down. I need time to think. Of course. But not too much time. These decisions become harder as the pregnancy progresses. That evening, Julian came home to find Mia cooking dinner, humming softly to herself. She looked radiant in the kitchen light, wearing one of his shirts over her jeans. For a moment, Julian could almost pretend his world wasn't crumbling. Perfect timing, she said, rising on her toes to kiss his cheek. I made your favorite. Julian, I need to tell you something incredible. His heart stopped. Please, not what I think it is. I'm pregnant, she whispered, launching herself into his arms. We're going to have a baby. Julian held her as she sobbed with happiness, and felt his soul tear in half. This should have been the best moment of his life. Instead, it was another twist of the knife in his gut. How far along? He asked, though he dreaded the answer. 8 weeks. The doctor said my everything looks perfect. Mia pulled back to look at his face. Julian, aren't you happy? You look shocked. It's wonderful news. I just need a moment to process. But there was more. There's something else, Mia said, her smile so bright it could have powered the city. Julian, we're having twins. The room spun. Julian gripped the edge of his desk to keep from falling. Twins? I know it's a lot, but isn't it amazing? The doctor says my implants may have failed, but that sometimes happens and it just means we were meant to have these babies. Julian stared at his wife. His beautiful, innocent wife who was glowing with joy over the children she thought were their new beginning. She had no idea that in a few months, she'd discover her husband had another child on the way with another woman. This changes everything, Mia continued. I've already called Patterson Industries to decline the Seattle project. I want to focus on our family now, on being the best mother I can be. Julian felt like he was drowning. Mia was giving up the career opportunity she'd fought for, was offering him everything he'd claimed to want, and he couldn't even properly celebrate because of the web of lies that was tightening around them both. I love you so much, Mia whispered against his chest. Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for helping me see what really matters. Julian held her close and tried not to think about how this perfect moment was built on a foundation of betrayal that would eventually destroy them both. That night, as Mia slept peacefully beside him with her hand on her still flat stomach, Julian stared at the ceiling and wondered how a man could have everything he'd ever wanted and lose it all at the same time. The web of deception was complete, and everyone Julian loved was caught in it, including the children who hadn't even been born yet. Julian thought he could manage the impossible situation. For 3 months, he lived in a hellish limbo of guilt and deception, watching Mia bloom with pregnancy while Cassandra's demands grew more frequent and more dangerous. We need to discuss arrangements, Cassandra would say during their tense meetings at discreet locations. Child support, visitation, how you plan to explain this to your wife. I've told you I'll provide financially. But Mia can never know. Oh, Julian. Cassandra's smile was sharp as broken glass. You still think you can control this narrative? How quaint. Julian began paying Cassandra substantial monthly sums, ostensibly for prenatal care and living expenses. She'd moved into a luxury apartment downtown and quit her job as a marketing executive, claiming pregnancy made work too stressful. At home, Mia was everything Julian had ever dreamed of in a wife and mother-to-be. She transformed one of their spare rooms into a nursery, painting soft yellow walls and researching the best cribs, car seats, and baby monitors. Her dedication to their unborn twins made Julian's guilt feel like acid in his veins. I can feel them moving, Mia whispered one evening as they lay in bed. She guided Julian's hand to her rounded belly. Right there. Do you feel it? Julian felt the flutter of tiny limbs against his palm and nearly broke down. These children would be born into a world already shattered by his lies. They would grow up with a father who destroyed their family before they even drew breath. They're going to be so loved, Mia murmured sleepily. So wanted. Julian kissed her forehead and said nothing because what was there to say? That their father was a liar and a cheat? That in a few months, they'd have a half-sibling they'd never know about? The breaking point came when Julian least expected it. Alex Martinez had been Cassandra's on-and-off boyfriend for 2 years, a relationship built on mutual manipulation and toxic attraction. He was a photographer who specialized in corporate events and society parties, which gave him access to the same circles where Cassandra hunted for wealthy targets. When Cassandra started her affair with Julian, she told Alex she was done with him. But Alex was obsessive, possessive, and dangerously intelligent. He'd been watching from the shadows, documenting Cassandra's movements, building a case for revenge. You used me, he told her during a confrontation at her apartment. Led me on while you were chasing Hale's money. Don't be dramatic, Alex. We were never exclusive. I loved you. You loved the idea of me. Just like Julian loves the idea of having everything he wants without consequences. Alex's dark eyes glittered with malice. What if I told his precious wife about your little arrangement? Cassandra went very still. You wouldn't. Wouldn't I? I have photos, Cassandra. Of you leaving his office building. Of him visiting your apartment. Of the checks he's been writing. For the first time since Julian had known her, Cassandra looked genuinely afraid. Then her expression shifted, and Alex saw the calculating intelligence that made her so dangerous. Actually, she said slowly, maybe you should tell her. But not directly. That would be too simple. What are you talking about? I'm talking about making Julian suffer the way he made us suffer. I'm talking about destroying his perfect little life piece by piece. Alex leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. How? His wife is pregnant, glowing, completely trusting. What if she discovered that her devoted husband wasn't so devoted after all? What if she found evidence that she'd been betrayed by the person she trusted most? Evidence like what? Cassandra's smile was purely evil. Evidence like compromising photos of her with another man. Photos that would make Julian question everything he thought he knew about his wife. Alex understood immediately. You want to frame her. I want to level the playing field. Julian gets to keep his secret while she carries his babies and worships the ground he walks on? No. If I'm going to be the other woman, then she gets to know what it feels like to be accused of infidelity. The plan they hatched was diabolical in its simplicity. Alex would approach Mia under the pretense of photographing her for a maternity feature in a luxury lifestyle magazine. During the shoot, they would drug her drink and stage compromising photos that would look like an affair. It has to be believable, Cassandra insisted. Julian has to think she actually betrayed him. And then what? Then Julian will be so devastated he'll leave her. And I'll be there to comfort him, to remind him that I'm carrying his child and would never betray him the way she did. Alex had his own reasons for wanting to hurt the woman who'd seemingly stolen Cassandra from him. In his twisted logic, if he couldn't have Cassandra, then Julian shouldn't get to keep his perfect wife either. The setup began with a phone call to Mia's office. Mrs. Hale? This is Alex Martinez from Metropolitan Lifestyle magazine. We're doing a feature on successful pregnant entrepreneurs, and your name came up as someone we'd love to profile. Mia was flattered but cautious. I'm not sure I qualify as an entrepreneur. I'm an interior designer who built her own firm from nothing. We're particularly interested in women who are balancing pregnancy with demanding careers. The shoot would be tasteful, elegant, think more artistic than commercial. After some consideration and encouragement from Julian, who thought the exposure would be good for her business, Mia agreed to the photo shoot. It was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon at Alex's studio, when Julian would be in meetings and unable to attend. Alex's studio was impressive, a converted warehouse space with professional lighting and elegant backdrops. Mia arrived wearing a flowing maternity dress that accentuated her curves without being revealing. You look radiant, Alex said, adjusting his camera settings. Pregnancy suits you. The shoot began innocently enough. Alex was professional, charming, and skilled at making his subjects feel comfortable. He photographed Mia against various backdrops, capturing her genuine joy about her pregnancy. Let me get you something to drink, Alex offered after they'd been working for an hour. You must be getting tired. He brought her sparkling water with a twist of lime, refreshing and innocent looking. Mia didn't notice the slight bitter aftertaste, attributing it to pregnancy's effect on her taste buds. 20 minutes later, she began feeling dizzy and disoriented. I think I need to sit down, she said, gripping the back of a chair. Of course. Pregnancy can be exhausting. Alex guided her to a leather sofa in his lounge area. Just rest for a moment. As the drug took hold, Mia's consciousness became foggy and fragmented. She was dimly aware of Alex continuing to take photos, of him positioning her in ways that felt wrong but that she couldn't resist in her drugged state. He photographed her appearing to embrace him, her hands seemingly caressing his face. He captured images that looked like passionate kisses, intimate touches, a woman surrendering to desire with someone who wasn't her husband. When Mia woke up 2 hours later, she was alone on the sofa with a pounding headache and gaps in her memory. What happened? She asked groggily when Alex appeared with a glass of water. You fainted. Completely normal for pregnant women but scary when it happens. I called my assistant to help make sure you were okay. Mia accepted his explanation because she had no reason not to. The photos from the legitimate part of the shoot were beautiful, and Alex promised to send her copies within the week. She went home that evening feeling slightly off but attributed it to pregnancy fatigue. Julian was working late as he often did these days, so she went to bed early and tried to shake the feeling that something important had happened that she couldn't quite remember. 3 days later, Julian found the envelope on his office desk. There was no return address, no note, just a manila envelope with his name typed on expensive stationery. Inside were a dozen photographs that made his blood freeze in his veins. Mia, his pregnant wife, in another man's arms. Mia kissing someone who wasn't him. Mia's hands tangled in a stranger's hair, her body pressed against his with unmistakable intimacy. The photos were timestamp stamped from Thursday afternoon, the same day she told him about her magazine photo shoot. Julian stared at the images until his eyes burned. Each photo was more damning than the last. His wife, his pregnant wife carrying his twins, apparently having an affair with the photographer who was supposed to be documenting her success. The irony was so cruel it took his breath away. Here he was, drowning in guilt over his betrayal with Cassandra, and Mia had been cheating on him too. All her talk about wanting to focus on their family, about giving up her career for their children, had it all been lies? Julian's hands shook as he studied the photos more closely. They looked authentic, professional quality. There was no denying what he was seeing. His wife's face was clearly visible, her body language unmistakable. Julian's pride, already wounded by months of guilt and deception, couldn't handle the visual evidence of his wife's apparent betrayal. The rational part of his mind that questioned the photos was drowned out by the roar of hurt and rage. He swept the photos back into the envelope and sat in his office chair, staring out at the city he'd conquered but that now felt like a hollow victory. If Mia could betray him while carrying his children, then nothing was sacred. Nothing was real. Julian Hale, master of his business empire, couldn't see that he was being played by experts in manipulation. His guilt over Cassandra made him assume Mia was capable of the same deception. He never suspected that the woman he'd betrayed was now being punished for crimes she hadn't committed, that the photos were as fake as his marriage was about to become. That evening, Julian went home with the envelope in his briefcase and murder in his heart, ready to confront the woman he loved with evidence of a betrayal that existed only in carefully staged lies. The trap was set. The web was closing. And 2 innocent babies were about to be born into a world destroyed by the sins of adults who should have protected them. Julian came home that evening carrying the weight of those photographs like stones in his chest. He found Mia in the nursery, folding tiny clothes with the careful attention she gave to everything she loved. The sight of her round with his children, glowing with maternal happiness, should have filled him with joy. Instead, it felt like looking at a beautiful lie. "How was your day?" she asked without turning around, holding up a miniature onesie with "Daddy's Little Angel" printed across the front. Julian stared at his wife, this woman he thought he knew completely, and felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Mia, we need to talk." Something in his tone made her turn. The smile faded from her face when she saw his expression. "Julian? What's wrong? You look terrible." "Sit down." "I'd rather stand. You're scaring me." Julian pulled the envelope from his briefcase with hands that trembled despite his efforts to stay calm. "I received some photographs today. At my office. Anonymous delivery." Mia's brow furrowed in confusion. "Photographs of what?" Instead of answering, Julian spread the images across the dresser they'd assembled together just weeks ago. Mia moved closer, curious, then stopped dead when she saw what they contained. "Oh my God." The blood drained from her face. "Julian, that's not. I never." "Thursday afternoon," Julian said, his voice deadly quiet. "During your magazine photo shoot with Alex Martinez." Mia stared at the photos in horror. There she was, unmistakably herself in another man's arms. But she had no memory of any of it. "This is impossible. I would remember." "Would you?" "Because these look pretty memorable to me." "Julian, I swear to you this never happened. I don't know how these exist, but I never touched that man. I never kissed him. I love you." "The evidence suggests otherwise." Mia's hands shook as she picked up one of the photos. Seeing herself in such a compromising position felt like looking at someone else wearing her face. "Someone did this to me. Someone staged these. Look at my eyes, I look drugged. Or you look like a woman caught up in passion with someone who isn't her husband." "How can you say that?" Tears started flowing down Mia's cheeks. "How can you look at me and believe I would do this? Especially now, carrying our babies? Because I'm looking at proof, Mia. These aren't some amateur snapshots. They're professional quality, time-stamped, detailed. Either you're the victim of the most elaborate frame-up in history, or you've been lying to me. I am the victim. Julian, please, you have to believe me. I went to that studio for a legitimate photo shoot. I felt dizzy and fainted. He must have drugged me somehow." Julian wanted to believe her. Part of him was screaming that this was exactly the kind of setup Mia was describing. But his guilt over Cassandra, his wounded pride, and the visual evidence in front of him created a toxic mixture that poisoned his judgment. "Even if someone drugged you," Julian said, his voice breaking, "these photos exist. They show my pregnant wife in another man's arms. How am I supposed to live with that image? By trusting me? By knowing who I am?" Mia stepped toward him, desperate. "Julian, I have never looked at another man since the day I met you. You are the only person I've ever loved this completely. These babies we're carrying, they were conceived in love, in trust, in everything pure between us. Were they?" The question came out harsher than Julian intended, fueled by his own guilt and the terrible irony of the situation. Mia recoiled as if he'd struck her. "What are you asking me?" "I'm asking if there's any possibility that these children aren't mine." The silence that followed was deafening. Mia stared at her husband, the man she'd given up her career dreams for, the father of her unborn children, and felt something die inside her chest. "Get out," she whispered. "Mia. Get out." The scream tore from her throat with such force that it left her gasping. "How dare you? How dare you question the paternity of your own children based on fake photographs? They don't look fake to me. Then you don't know me at all. And if you don't know me, you have no business being the father of my babies." Julian gathered the photos, his movements sharp and angry. "I'll be staying at the office tonight. We'll discuss this when you're ready to tell me the truth." "The truth?" Mia's voice was hollow now, drained of fight. "The truth is that I loved you more than my own life. The truth is that I trusted you completely. And the truth is that apparently that means nothing to you." Julian paused at the nursery door, his back to his wife. For a moment, Mia thought he might turn around, might remember who they were to each other. Instead, he walked away, leaving her alone with the evidence of a betrayal she couldn't remember and babies who would be born into a broken world. That night, Mia lay awake in their bed, her hands on her belly, talking to her unborn children. "I don't know what's going to happen," she whispered. "But I promise you this, I will protect you. I will love you enough for both of us if I have to." Julian spent the night in his office, drinking expensive whiskey and staring at those damning photographs. By morning, he'd convinced himself that divorce was the only option. He called his lawyer and had papers drawn up immediately. 3 days later, Mia woke up to cramping pain that stole her breath. She was only 36 weeks pregnant, too early for the twins to be born safely. "No, no, no," she gasped, feeling wetness between her legs. Her water had broken. She called Julian frantically, her fingers shaking so badly she could barely dial. "Julian, please, I need you. The babies are coming." "I'm in a meeting, Mia. The babies are coming now. I'm bleeding. Something's wrong." She heard him curse softly, then the sound of shuffling papers. "I'll meet you at the hospital. Julian, please hurry. I'm scared." But the line was already dead. Mia called an ambulance and was rushed to Metropolitan General in active labor. The medical team worked frantically to slow her contractions, but the twins were determined to make their entrance into the world. Julian arrived 4 hours later, when Mia was already in the delivery room. He looked impeccable in his business suit, but his eyes were cold as winter stone. "How is she?" he asked the nurse. "Both babies are in distress. We're doing everything we can, but premature twins are always high risk." Julian stood outside the delivery room, listening to Mia's screams of pain, and felt nothing but numbness. This should have been the most important day of his life. Instead, it felt like attending a funeral. When the doctor finally emerged, she was smiling. "Congratulations, Mr. Hale. You have 2 healthy babies, a boy and a girl. Small, but their lungs are strong. Your wife did beautifully." Julian nodded mechanically. "Can I see them?" "Of course. They're with your wife now." Julian entered the recovery room to find Mia exhausted but radiant, holding 2 tiny bundles against her chest. Despite everything between them, the sight of his children, his actual children, hit him like a physical blow. They were perfect. Tiny fingers, delicate features, the soft downy hair that all newborns had. The boy had Julian's strong jaw, while the girl had Mia's elegant nose. "They're beautiful," Julian said quietly. Mia looked up at him with eyes that held no warmth. "Would you like to hold your son?" Julian reached for the baby, and for a moment as he cradled his child, he almost forgot about the photographs, the betrayal, the pain between them. This was his son. His flesh and blood. "What will you name them?" he asked. "I will name them," Mia corrected. Since apparently their paternity was in question, I assumed their names are my decision alone. The words hit Julian like a slap. He handed the baby back to Mia and reached into his jacket pocket. "Actually, there's something we need to discuss." Mia's blood turned to ice when she saw the legal envelope. "Julian, no. Not here. Not now. I can't do this anymore, Mia. I can't be married to someone I don't trust." Julian placed the divorce papers on the hospital bed beside his wife and newborn children. The gesture was so cold, so calculated, that Mia felt something break inside her that would never heal. "Sign them," Julian said. "I'll make sure you're provided for. The children too. But I can't pretend this marriage is real anymore. Julian, please." "Cassandra is carrying my child," he said, the words falling like bombs. "We're getting married today." Mia stared at him, her newborn daughter in her arms, and felt the last piece of her world crumble. "You're leaving me for another woman? While I'm in a hospital bed with your children? I'm leaving you because you betrayed me first." "I never betrayed you. Those photos are lies." "Sign the papers, Mia." With shaking hands, her tears falling onto the legal documents, Mia signed away the marriage she'd thought would last forever. She signed while her son slept peacefully in the hospital bassinet and her daughter nursed at her breast. Julian took the papers without another word and walked out of the hospital room, leaving his wife and newborn children behind like they were a business deal that hadn't worked out. The last thing Mia heard was the sound of his expensive shoes clicking down the hospital corridor, each step taking him further away from the family he'd just destroyed. That night, alone with her babies in the recovery room, Mia made a promise that would sustain her through the dark years ahead. I will be enough for you. I will love you so completely that you'll never feel the absence of the man who walked away. But even as she spoke the words, she couldn't stop hoping that someday, somehow Julian would realize what he'd lost and find his way back to them. Have you ever experienced betrayal that cut so deep it changed who you were? Sometimes the people we love most are capable of hurting us in ways we never imagined possible. Share your thoughts about forgiveness and whether some wounds can ever truly heal. The headlines screamed across every gossip blog and society page. Millionaire CEO dumps wife hours after she gives birth, marries pregnant mistress in whirlwind ceremony. Julian Hale had become the villain in a story that played out in tabloids and social media feeds across the city. Photos of him leaving the hospital while Mia remained inside with their newborn twins painted him as the ultimate heartless husband. But Julian told himself he didn't care what strangers thought. He knew the truth about Mia's betrayal, even if the world didn't. The wedding to Cassandra took place in a private ceremony at the Meridian Hotel. It was elegant, expensive, and completely soulless. Julian stood at the altar in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, watching Cassandra glide toward him in designer white silk that couldn't quite hide her growing pregnancy, and felt absolutely nothing. Do you, Julian Hale, take Cassandra to be your lawfully wedded wife? The officiant asked. Julian looked into Cassandra's triumphant smile and said, I do, though the words tasted like ash in his mouth. When they kissed to seal their union, Julian closed his eyes and tried not to think about another wedding day, when he'd married a woman who made him believe in forever. The reception was attended by Cassandra's society friends and business associates who'd come more for the scandal than to celebrate love. Julian moved through the evening like a ghost, accepting congratulations that felt like condolences. You made the right choice, Marcus told him during a quiet moment on the hotel balcony. A man has to be able to trust his wife. Then why do I feel like I've made the biggest mistake of my life? Julian asked, staring out at the city lights. Because divorce is never easy, even when it's necessary. You'll feel better once the baby comes. But Julian didn't feel better. He felt worse with each passing day. Cassandra moved into his penthouse immediately after their honeymoon in Tuscany, and within weeks her true nature began to emerge like a slow-acting poison. The seductive, understanding woman who'd comforted him in his pain transformed into someone demanding, controlling, and vindictive. I don't like that restaurant, she'd say when Julian suggested dinner at places he'd loved. Too many memories of your precious Mia, I suppose? She redecorated the penthouse without consulting him, erasing every trace of his life with Mia and replacing it with cold, modern furniture that felt like a showroom. The nursery he and Mia had lovingly prepared was stripped bare and redesigned in harsh black and white. Pink and yellow are so cliché, Cassandra declared. Our child will have more sophisticated taste. Julian found himself working later and later, dreading going home to a woman who grew more unrecognizable each day. Cassandra complained constantly about his work schedule, his friends, his failure to publicly defend their whirlwind marriage against media criticism. People are saying I'm a homewrecker, she pouted one evening as Julian tried to eat dinner in peace. People say a lot of things. But you're not doing anything to defend me. To defend us. Julian looked at his new wife, beautiful, elegant, and completely empty, and wondered how he'd ever thought she could replace what he'd lost. What would you like me to do, Cassandra? Take out a full-page ad explaining why I left my wife and newborn children. Don't be sarcastic. It's beneath you. Apparently, a lot of things are beneath me these days. Cassandra's pregnancy progressed, but unlike Mia's joyful anticipation, this felt clinical and obligatory. She complained about every symptom, demanded constant attention, and showed no maternal instinct whatsoever. When Julian suggested they attend parenting classes, she laughed. That's what nannies are for, darling. I'm not planning to change diapers. Meanwhile, Julian received regular reports from the private investigator he'd hired to monitor Mia and the twins. The reports were like torture. Mia was raising Emma and James alone in a modest apartment, working freelance design projects from home while caring for 2 infants. The photographs the investigator provided showed a woman who'd aged years and months. Mia looked exhausted, thin, but completely devoted to their children. Julian would stare at pictures of her reading to the twins, playing with them in the small park near her apartment, carrying them in matching baby carriers, and feel his heart break a little more each day. "Why do you keep torturing yourself?" Cassandra demanded when she found the investigator's latest report on Julian's desk. "She betrayed you. She made her choice. I'm carrying your child now. The only child that should matter to you." But the child Cassandra carried felt like an obligation, not a blessing. Julian went through the motions of excited expectancy, but every prenatal appointment felt hollow compared to the joy he'd experienced with Mia. One rainy night, he returned home to find Cassandra in a rage about his 3-day absence. The fight was explosive, ugly, and revealed the depths of her selfishness. But it was nothing compared to what Julian discovered the next morning. Alex Martinez called him drunk and bitter, with news that shattered Julian's world completely. "You want to know the truth about those photos, Hale? Ask your wife. Ask Cassandra how much she paid me to destroy your marriage." The phone slipped from Julian's nerveless fingers as Alex's drunken confession poured out. The setup, the drugs, the staged photographs, Cassandra's manipulation from beginning to end. Julian Hale, master of reading people and situations, had been played by experts. And the price of his blindness was everything he'd ever truly loved. Alex's drunken confession hit Julian like a physical blow. He sat in his office, staring at the phone as the photographer's slurred words replayed in his mind. "Cassandra paid me to frame your wife. The photos were staged. Mia never touched me and that baby is mine, not yours." Julian's hands shook as he called Alex back, but the number went straight to voicemail. He tried 17 more times throughout the day, desperation growing with each unanswered ring. By evening, he realized Alex had likely passed out or deliberately gone unreachable. But Julian didn't need Alex's cooperation to uncover the truth. 24 hours later, he had hired Thomas Brennan, the most thorough private investigator in the city, the same man who'd been providing him with reports about Mia and the twins. "I need you to investigate my wife," Julian said during their meeting in a discreet downtown office. "Cassandra Hale. Specifically, her relationship with Alex Martinez and any involvement in fabricated photographs." Brennan, a former FBI agent with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes, studied Julian's face. "This is about the photos that ended your first marriage?" "Yes." "Mr. Hale, if those photos were fabricated and you divorced an innocent woman..." Brennan let the implications hang in the air. "Then I've destroyed the lives of the 3 most important people in my world. Can you prove it?" "If there's evidence to find, I'll find it." Brennan was efficient and discreet. Within a week, he'd uncovered a trail of evidence that painted a picture of elaborate deception. Bank records showed payments from Cassandra to Alex totaling $50,000 in the weeks leading up to the photo shoot. Phone records revealed dozens of calls between them during the same period. Security footage from Alex's building showed Cassandra visiting his studio multiple times. But the most damning evidence came from Alex's computer, which Brennan accessed through contacts in law enforcement. The hard drive contained the original, unedited photos showing Mia clearly unconscious and being positioned by Alex like a doll. There were dozens of test shots, attempts to get the lighting and angles right to make the deception believable. "Your wife was definitely drugged," Brennan reported during their second meeting. The timestamps show a clear progression from normal interaction to unconsciousness to staged positioning. "The edited photos that destroyed your marriage are masterful fabrications." Julian stared at the evidence spread across Brennan's desk and felt his soul crumble. Mia was telling the truth. She was innocent. Completely. And there's more. Brennan produced a chat record. "The child your current wife is carrying?" The conversation between them shows Alex Martinez is the father, not you. The room spun around Julian. "What?" "Cassandra was pregnant before she slept with you. The timing of your encounter was calculated to make you believe the child was yours. This entire scenario was orchestrated to destroy your marriage and position herself as your wife." Julian gripped the edge of Brennan's desk, feeling physically sick. "She planned everything. From the beginning. Every detail. The affair with you was deliberate. The pregnancy announcement was timed perfectly. The photo setup was designed to make you doubt your wife's fidelity while you were drowning in guilt over your own." "What? Why go to such elaborate lengths?" "Money, status, revenge, the usual motivations. Our investigation suggests Cassandra has done this before, though never quite so successfully. You were her biggest score." Julian left Brennan's office feeling like a man who'd discovered he'd been living someone else's nightmare. Every moment of his marriage to Cassandra had been built on lies. Every doubt he'd had about Mia had been carefully planted manipulation. He thought of his innocent wife, struggling alone with their children while he'd abandoned them for a woman who'd orchestrated their family's destruction. He thought of Emma and James, growing up without their father because he'd been too proud and too blind to see the truth. The confrontation with Cassandra came that evening. Julian walked into their penthouse, the space that had once been his sanctuary with Mia and was now a cold monument to his stupidity, carrying an envelope full of evidence. "You're home early," Cassandra said, looking up from her magazine. At 8 months pregnant, she was beautiful in the calculated way she'd always been, but Julian now saw the predator beneath the polish. "We need to talk." Something in his tone made her set down the magazine. "About what?" Julian spread the photographs across their coffee table, the real photos showing Alex positioning an unconscious Mia. Cassandra's face went through a fascinating progression of emotions: surprise, calculation, defiance, and finally cold fury. "Where did you get these? Does it matter? The question is, why did you destroy my family?" Cassandra stood slowly, her hand on her pregnant belly. "Your family was already broken, Julian. You came to me, remember? You're the one who cheated. One night of weakness versus months of calculated manipulation. You planned everything: the pregnancy, the photos, the destruction of my marriage to an innocent woman." "Innocent?" Cassandra laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Your precious Mia was never innocent. She was cold, career-obsessed, unwilling to give you what you needed. What I needed was honesty. What I needed was love. Things you're incapable of giving. I gave you everything. I gave up my career, my independence, my body to carry your child." "Alex's child?" Julian said quietly. Cassandra went very still. For a moment, Julian saw fear flicker across her features before it was replaced by icy rage. "You bastard. You had no right. I had every right. I'm the man you've been lying to for over a year. So what now? You divorce me too? Add another scandal to your reputation?" "Yes," Julian said simply. "I'm divorcing you. And I'm making sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are." The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Julian's lawyers, armed with irrefutable evidence of fraud and deception, ensured Cassandra received nothing beyond basic legal minimums. The media, hungry for the next chapter in Julian Hale's romantic disasters, covered every detail. But Julian didn't care about public humiliation anymore. He cared about one thing: finding Mia and begging for forgiveness that he didn't deserve. The search took courage Julian wasn't sure he possessed. Mia had moved 3 times since their divorce, always staying ahead of his attempts to provide financial support. She wanted nothing from him: no money, no contact, no acknowledgement. He finally found her through Emma and James's pediatrician, who mentioned in passing that the twins' mother had brought them in for their 1-year checkups. Julian waited outside the medical building for 4 hours until he saw her emerge, carrying both children with the exhausted grace of a single mother doing everything alone. She looked older, thinner, but still beautiful in a way that made Julian's chest ache. Emma and James had grown so much, and Julian realized with devastating clarity that he'd missed an entire year of their lives: first words, first steps, first everything. "Mia," he called softly. She turned, and when she saw him, her face went completely blank. "Julian. Please. Can we talk? I know the truth now. About Cassandra, about the photos, about everything." Mia's grip tightened on their children. "It's too late for truth, Julian. Please. Just 5 minutes. I know I don't deserve it, but—" "You're right," Mia said, her voice steady as steel. "You don't deserve it. You destroyed our family based on lies, and now you want forgiveness because you finally discovered what I tried to tell you a year ago. Mia, I was wrong. I was so terribly, completely wrong." She looked at him for a long moment, and Julian saw the woman he'd fallen in love with buried beneath layers of pain and protective armor. 5 minutes, she said finally. "But not here. The children don't need to see this." They met at a small coffee shop 3 blocks from Mia's apartment. She chose a table near the back, away from curious eyes, and Julian noticed how she positioned herself with a clear view of all exits, like someone who'd learned to always have an escape route ready. Julian sat across from the woman he'd once called his soulmate and searched for words that could bridge the chasm his betrayal had created. "I hired a private investigator," he began. "I know about Cassandra and Alex, about the staged photos, about the drugs they gave you. I know the baby she's carrying isn't mine. I know everything." Mia's expression didn't change. "Congratulations. You've discovered what I tried to tell you while I was in a hospital bed with your newborn children." "Mia, I was devastated by my own guilt. I cheated on you with Cassandra, and when those photos appeared I thought. You thought I was as weak as you were. Her voice was quiet but it cut like a blade. You thought I was capable of the same betrayal you'd already committed. Julian flinched. Yes. At least you're honest now. Mia glanced at her watch. You have 3 minutes left. I want to be part of their lives. Emma and James deserve to know their father. They have a father. He's been absent for the first year of their existence because he chose to believe lies over the woman who loved him. I can't change what I did. But I can spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. Mia studied his face, looking for deception, for manipulation, for any sign that this was another elaborate game. What she saw instead was a broken man who'd finally understood the magnitude of his mistakes. What do you want from me, Julian? A chance. The smallest possible chance to prove that I can be the man you married, the father our children deserve. And if I say no? Then I'll respect that decision. But I'll never stop hoping that someday you might change your mind. Mia was quiet for a long moment, watching Julian's hands shake as he waited for her answer. Finally she spoke. You can see them. Supervised visits, 1 hour twice a week. But Julian, understand this, you don't get to be their father just because your DNA helped create them. You have to earn that title every single day. It was more than Julian had dared hope for, and far less than he deserved to ask for. The first visit was awkward and heartbreaking. Emma and James, now walking toddlers with Mia's intelligent eyes and Julian's stubborn chin, were shy around the stranger their mother called Daddy. Julian sat on Mia's living room floor, surrounded by toys he hadn't chosen and children who didn't know him, and felt the full weight of everything he'd lost. Emma likes books, Mia said, watching her daughter examine Julian with curious suspicion. James is obsessed with anything that has wheels. Julian pulled out his phone to show Emma a picture, and she immediately reached for the bright screen. Careful, Mia said automatically. She puts everything in her mouth. I know, Julian said, then realized how presumptuous that sounded. I mean, I remember from the parenting books we read together. It was a small moment, but it cracked something in Mia's carefully constructed armor. He remembered. Despite everything, he remembered the plans they'd made together. The visits continued twice a week, religiously. Julian never missed one, never rescheduled, never treated their time as negotiable. He learned that Emma loved being read to and James could spend hours pushing toy cars around the apartment. He discovered that both children had inherited his sweet tooth and Mia's stubborn streak. Slowly, the children began to warm to him. Emma would bring him books to read. James would share his favorite trucks. And Julian began to understand what he'd missed during that crucial first year. Not just milestones, but the daily magic of watching two human beings discover the world. They're amazing, he told Mia after a particularly good visit where both children had fallen asleep in his arms. You've done such a beautiful job with them. I had to, Mia replied. There was no one else. The words weren't meant to hurt, but they did. Julian absorbed the pain as part of his penance. Months passed. Julian's visits became part of the children's routine. He would arrive exactly on time with age-appropriate books or toys, would play with Emma and James with complete attention, and would leave without asking for more than Mia was willing to give. But he was also quietly making their lives easier in ways Mia couldn't ignore. When her car broke down, a rental appeared in her parking space with a note. For the children's safety. J. When James needed expensive ear surgery, the medical bills were mysteriously paid in full. When Emma showed signs of advanced intelligence, information about the best preschools appeared in Mia's mailbox. You don't have to do this, Mia told him one evening as he prepared to leave after reading bedtime stories. Yes, I do. They're my children. This is my responsibility. I mean the guilt payments. The anonymous help. Julian paused at her door. It's not guilt, Mia. It's love. I love them. I love. He stopped, knowing he had no right to finish that sentence. As the second year of visits progressed, something began to shift. Julian proved himself reliable, present, completely devoted to Emma and James. He never pushed for more time, never made demands, never tried to undermine Mia's authority as their primary parent. He simply showed up, consistently and completely. The children began asking for Daddy on the days he wasn't scheduled to visit. They would run to the window when his car pulled up, would cry when he had to leave. Julian was becoming not just a visitor but a part of their lives. Mia watched this transformation with a mixture of hope and terror. The man sitting on her living room floor, patiently teaching James to stack blocks while Emma read him a story, looked like the Julian she'd fallen in love with. But could she trust that this version of him was real? The breakthrough came on a rainy Saturday afternoon when Emma fell and scraped her knee badly. Julian was there for his scheduled visit, and without thinking, Mia called for him to help. "Julian, can you get the first aid kit from the bathroom while I hold her?" He moved instantly, returning with supplies and gentle hands that cleaned Emma's wound while he whispered soothing words. It was such a natural parental moment, such an instinctive partnership, that Mia felt her heart crack open just a little. "Thank you," she said when Emma was bandaged and calm. "Thank you for letting me help." That evening, after the children were asleep, Mia made a decision that terrified her. "Would you like to stay for dinner next time? The kids keep asking why Daddy has to leave when they eat." Julian's eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. "I would love that. More than anything." The family dinners became a new tradition. Then weekend park visits. Then Julian helping with bedtime routines. Slowly, carefully, they began to rebuild something that resembled a family. One golden afternoon, as they sat in the small garden behind Mia's apartment building watching Emma and James chase butterflies, Mia felt something she hadn't experienced in 2 years: peace. "They're happy," she said, watching their children play. "So are you," Julian observed quietly. "You're smiling." Mia realized he was right. Somewhere in the careful reconstruction of their family, she'd found her way back to joy. "Julian," she said, not looking at him, "I think, maybe we could try. Not marriage, not promises about forever. But maybe we could try to see if there's anything left to rebuild." Julian took her hand carefully, like she was made of the most delicate glass. "I would spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that chance." As the sun set behind them and their children played in the dying light, Mia whispered the words that would change everything. "Then let's try. Let's see if we can start again." Julian squeezed her hand gently. "No rush. We have the rest of our lives." And for the first time in 2 years, that felt like a promise instead of a threat. What do you think about second chances in love? Can trust really be rebuilt after such deep betrayal, or are some wounds too deep to heal completely? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about love, redemption, and the power of never giving up on the people who matter most.